writing songs? Have you been writing songs for many, many years? It would be really cool to kind of get a gauge of, I guess, where the kind of group is at. So yeah, chuck it in the chat. Are you a songwriter? Are you wanting to get involved in songwriting? You have been writing for years and you're just here to maybe pick up another angle of doing things. It'd be really cool for us to get a gauge of, I guess, everyone's kind of involvement and what you're kind of wanting to get out of the session. That'd be really helpful for us guys. So awesome. A few people putting in their beginners. Not a songwriter, but cool. Arrangers. Have written one song, nothing past that. Beginner. Awesome.
Started at 14 and then stopped after a few years.
Cool. Spoken word. Awesome. Keep posting in the chat. It's really helpful for us to know as we kind of, before we get into the session.
Yeah.
Intermediate in production and beginners writing, beginner. Awesome, guys. It's really cool to see, I guess, where everyone's at on their kind of songwriting journey.
Cool.
Beginner. Awesome. Very, very, very cool.
Nice. We think that the written a few songs, great to learn more. Yeah, in terms of how to get started, the unfortunate reality, but also very exciting reality, is that the best way to get started is literally just to start. Write anything, and I promise you it will suck. Or
it may not.
Well,
you may be one of the few.
Statistically speaking, it'll probably suck. I don't think Joel Houston's first song sucked. He's probably the only person in the world. But yeah, but the best way is just to keep, just to start trying and then keep on trying. And the more that you write, you get better, but there is kind of no other way than just to start. Record yourself, show someone, what do you think about this? Prepare for critique. But yeah, best way to start is to just kind of start off with anything. It could be a verse or a melody. But yeah, whatever you start.
Awesome. It looks like everyone, well, a large majority of the Zoom here is kind of beginner, at a beginning stage of really wanting to get involved in it. And I'll also just add that, you know, we're not experts, but also I think writing in the context of a church is really different to just writing outside of church for kind of just a personal project or a band.
Yeah.
So that's just to keep in mind. Everything we're kind of talking about here is very specific to the context of the church.
Context, yeah.
Some of that you can take and apply to songwriting anywhere and everywhere, but there are some really unique, I guess, kind of challenges and boundaries that we deal with in writing in a church setting. Because for one, you're writing for a congregation. You have to write songs that people can sing along to, which is a bit different if you're writing a pop song, you know what I mean? So there are a lot of different kind of guidelines that apply, which we'll kind of be able to talk about as we get a bit more into it. But yeah just so everyone knows, we are talking about songwriting within a church context as well. But yeah, as Josh said, just give it a go. There's only one way to find out if you can or can't, or if you need to just develop. It's just try, just get in, just try, write a song. I saw even in a documentary recently with Billie Eilish and Phineas. You guys may have heard of them. They're like some of the biggest pop stars in the world. But the way they started is that their parents just said, just challenge them, just try, write a song and see what happens. So yeah, that's definitely kind of main point in terms of how to get started.
Yeah,
just try. Just try, give it a go.
Yeah
Awesome. Yeah, so I imagine getting when you start to write songs, it comes from an idea. And how do you get ideas for songs? And is every idea that you get meant to be turned into a finished song?
Yeah, I think in terms of coming up with ideas, there are a few good things. Obviously, read the Bible. And you know, if you're trying to sort of go after writing a song, it's good to, of course, engage in the Spirit. So ask the Holy Spirit to highlight something to you as you read. Something might stand out. We always are keeping an ear out for what Pastor Sam is saying on Sundays. So if we're sitting in church and he's preaching, and then we're hearing kind of what's on his heart for the church and what's on his heart for the next season, then we think, oh, that could be a good thing to write a song about. Ideas can just spring. often there are little sort of things that little concepts or ideas, in sermons that people will say that just like, oh, that really clicks. That's an awesome thing to declare over the church. Another good thing is just kind of look at the church or the world and think about where what you're seeing doesn't match up to kingdom culture. And then, so for instance, for us, one thing that we saw was, like a lack of praise, the kind of praise culture in the church. And so we thought, oh, that's something that, you maybe want to write a song about, like that kind of, this is how we party concept. And so looking at where things need to shift and then writing a song that ministers to that is also a good way to start, with getting ideas from there.
And I think a really important element for us as, leaders, as part of the worship team, as worship leaders, but especially as songwriters, I think it's really important to just, as Josh was saying, just tap into what the Holy Spirit is doing. We need to be in tune, because often what we found and experienced is that it's really prophetic what we're doing. So as songwriters, we sing and declare things within the context of our church that is really important. So many times Josh or I have received a feeling, an inkling. We've really felt that the Holy Spirit is speaking something to us, and then we've experienced both sides of it. Sometimes we've just jumped on that idea immediately. We've started to write it, because often when the Holy Spirit gives us ideas or speaks to us, when it's prophetic, it won't make sense in the now. But if you go with it, if you develop that idea, you keep working on it, what we've often found is that it makes sense later on. A few months down the track, we'll have a song that is really relevant to what's going on in our church. And it kind of is perfect timing. So that's another thing that's really important. Just really spend time with God. That's why it's the core of everything we do as a Christian, but also as songwriters, because we've also experienced hearing something from God, and then we haven't developed that idea. We haven't prayed through it, worshiped through it, and kept developing that as a song. And then we've also experienced the disappointing side of it for us, where we've been sitting in our church and then we hear our pastor speaking about something that we felt the Holy Spirit telling to us months beforehand. And then we're sitting there in the service thinking, oh man, we messed up. we missed an opportunity to bring a song that would have really lifted our congregation, lifted our church, because it was what God was saying to our leadership, to our pastors, to our church at the time. So I think just, we need to be close to God so that you can be really aware of what the Holy Spirit's doing, and just know that often it won't make sense at the time, but it'll make sense later on as well. So that's a really important element of how do you get an idea for a song. There's the side of it where Josh kind of talked about with getting inspiration from the pastor, what they're preaching, but then there's the other side of it, which is the prophetic, which is a bit trickier, but often it's been really incredible to kind of experience that side of it too.
So a good rule, I think, is if you ever have any idea, you're never going to waste your time finishing something, even if even if you finish the song and it sucks, you're just getting reps at songwriting. It's like the practice. No time is wasted. It's like gymming. You could see no results, but you know that you're building muscle underneath. And so you might not have a good song after it that no one may hear because it's really bad. But even if it's just, practice for you, or just a song, for you to sing to God one time and then forget about because it was terrible, there's always value in it. So whether every idea is meant to be completed or not, I think there's always value in completing.
I'd say we'd say no time is wasted songwriting, because that's time that you're putting into your craft. That's time you're putting into training yourself. And as Josh said, it's like the gym. So just know, because sometimes it can be really disheartening when you spend hours working on a song, days, months working on a song, and then if nothing comes of it, sometimes it can be really disappointing. But just know that all that time you thought was wasted, you were putting that time into getting better, into developing your skill, into your craft, which will pay off down the road. But you might not realize it at the time. So that's just a really important thing to keep in mind as well. In terms of, is every idea meant to be finished, how do you start? So yeah.
Awesome. And
About
just this isn't on your sheet, I know that. But how would you guys estimate? We've only seen the songs that have come on the albums that have been released. How many songs do you think you guys have written that weren't okay? These aren't ones we're releasing, but we finished them.
I'd say at the start, only about 5 to 10% of all the songs we write would actually be heard by anyone.
Yeah.
I know, like in the creative industry, for example, in advertising, which is where my background is, only like 2 to 5% of all ideas make it through. So it kind of can suck, and it can be a really hard reality. But just know that none of that 90% was wasted at all.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
if you only get a little bit of it finished or heard by anyone, just know that none of that time was wasted. And as you get older, get a bit more, sorry, not necessarily older, but as you get more experience, I feel like that percentage will start to shift. I think nowadays, probably 60% of our ideas will make it through. And that's like 5+ years later.
Yeah.
So just know that the more experience you get, it doesn't necessarily get any easier, but you get a better understanding better feel for what works and what doesn't in your context, which for us is church. So we're a little bit better. But yeah, in terms of percentage of ideas that make it through, don't be disheartened when only very few make it through. It's a very normal part of the creative process.
Totally, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So once you get the ideas, whether it's prophetic or from a leader in the church or whatever it is, what are the steps to take the idea into a finished song? What are the steps for that? What's the creative process?
Yeah, I think firstly to start, we just want to say you've probably heard this before, but the best thing about songwriting and why we love it so much is that there's no set way of doing it.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different way of doing it. Everyone has a different starting point and a different process, and that's totally fine. So when it comes to something like this, where you're listening to some songwriters speak, just take little things from every different creative, and you can apply that. But I would say there's no
no set way to do it.
Set way to do it. And that's kind of the beauty of it. So Josh will kind of just explain our process, and maybe you might get a few tips or tricks, or maybe just some guidelines that you can try yourself.
Yeah.
And then as you develop your own songwriting skills, you'll develop a process that works for you, which is really cool. And it changes all the time too, which is why we enjoy it so much. For you.
Yeah, it is very fluid, and every song can be different. But we've sort of noticed generally this is how we work. Is the first thing that we'll kind of have, and I think it is very helpful to start with this. Is the first thing we have is generally the whole kind of concept of the song. So the concept could be this song is about being courageous or about being brave, or the song is about how God fights on our behalf, something like that. And we also like to get a song title as early as possible, just like a working title, because it helps. Then you can filter everything back through that title. Like, does this chord choice sound like a song that's called Brave should sound? You know what I mean? And then once we have the concept, we'll kind of start working on melodic ideas, melodies. So just kind of humming, or we have so many demos that have like one line and then da na 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 na, just sort of la la la's or whatever.
Yeah.
And then once we have the melodies of the song set, then we'll kind of work on finishing up the lyrics. The melody and the lyrics generally kind of come at the same time, but once you have all the melodies for the song, like the verse melody, the chorus melody, and the bridge, you can kind of structure it and feel like, oh yeah, this is going to work. And then lyrics are generally the thing that will kind of often go for a while down the track. But the good thing about when you have the melodies and the concept and everything there is you can work on all of the music and the arrangements and the drum parts and guitar parts and stuff like that, and just know, oh yeah, we still got to finish those lyrics eventually. But it is helpful kind of going like that.
But I'd say, yeah, we pretty much follow the simple structure of concept or idea, melody, and then we do lyrics later on. Because once you've got a melody kind of locked in, you can kind of explore the lyrics there and really dial in. I know that's how a lot of, for example, a lot of the Hillsong United songwriters work. They kind of work around that framework.
It's really hard.
Well.
It's really hard to write lyrics when you don't have a melody, because it's like you're just sort of aimless. There are no boundaries, or like him was saying, there isn't really a framework, so you can just sort of write endlessly, and you don't know if this is good. But also, when you have the main song, you can work on lyrics for the next 3 months and have whole pads full of them, and then it means you've really spent your due diligence. And I think it's good to spend lots of time on the lyrics, especially in church, because you're putting words in people's mouths, and so it isn't something you want to take lightly, because you're kind of giving people the words that they're going to declare over themselves and over the church. And so
and I'll just give one example of how that process, a song we've written, and how that's played out in that process. So one of our Equippers songs, which is one of the first songs that Josh and I kind of wrote together, it's called "This Is How We Party." Hands up if you've heard it before. Cool. If you're at Equippers, I hope you would have heard it. Awesome. So that was an interesting process, because that one concept we started with, we actually wrote multiple songs around that kind of concept before we'd actually settled on the actual song. So we started with a concept. We had these youth nights that were just incredible. It was pretty much like the best party I'd ever been to. There was 400 to 500 teenagers in a room, all praising God, which is what was happening in our youth ministry at the time. And I just kept feeling and kept thinking about, like, man, this is actually where the party is. Pastor Sam always says the greatest party on the face of the earth should be in the church. And so that was really resonating with me. And I just essentially wanted to capture what God was already doing in our youth ministry, capture that in a song. So we had that concept of a party, church is the party, for a long time. And we wrote multiple songs that just didn't work. But what Josh did was he took that concept and he developed music that was really joyful, was really happy. And once we had that music, we could just start singing ideas over the top. And then after working on it for maybe 5 or 6 months, one night we were in the studio, very late at night, early in the morning, and that night we had one of those youth nights. So we wanted to finish the song for that night, and then for some reason it just all clicked in one moment. Josh played the chorus, and we just sung the chorus as it is now. So it was like sometimes you work and work and work and work, and then, as I said before, it's that 5% where it all just kind of clicks and makes sense. So just that's kind of worked. And then from there, we just developed the lyrics because we had a melody there. So that's kind of just an example of how a song can go from just an idea, a prayer, a thought, inspiration, to a melody, and then you figure out the music and the lyrics further on the process. So that's just one example.
And then once we kind of have, so we'll jump on to like Logic or something like that, some kind of computer music making software, and we'll record the song and work on all the things. And generally at that point, we just want to make it sound as good as we can with our skill set. So if you don't know how to use any of that stuff, then like try and record it really well on your phone or something, just so we can present the song well to our pastors, so they can critique it. So we always submit it to Pastor Sam to approve. And then if he has things he wants to change, like, I don't know, like this concept, just for this, it's not wrong, but for the season that we're in as a church, I'd rather sing about this, then we can tweak it. And then once he approves it, we'll play it at church. And if it works well at church, then it's like, yeah, cool, we're done. And then we keep doing it. And then, but often when you play it at church, you can see, this part here didn't really work, so then you can tweak it some more, and once it's kind of working, then it's good. And then for if you're recording songs, what we'll do once we're kind of playing them at church is we'll go through and we'll really polish the arrangement. So we'll kind of work on the sounds and stuff like that, and then we kind of have like a week where we go and record the songs properly, and then get them mixed, and then we release them.
Wow. Yeah, awesome. That's an awesome process. And you kind of got into some tools there. And if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. If we have time at the end, if we don't answer the question, we'll get to those questions. But you've kind of talked about Logic and tools. Are there any tools that have helped you guys in writing songs? Any technical things other than tools, or any just extra things you picked up that have helped expedite the process or just made it easier?
Yes, Kenan's going to tell you about his favorite tool.
The phone.
Oh.
Voice memo app is a songwriter's best friend. Anyone agree? Anyone agree out there? Amen. I'm sure you've heard this before, but make sure you record every idea you get, because no one likes it when you have that inspiration strikes and then you don't record it and you wake up the next day and you can't remember the idea.
Oh,
You hear an
true.
amazing song in your dream.
Hands up who's experienced that in any way, shape, or form with creativity. So I'd say, yeah, it sucks. So
Yeah.
I'd say I'm not very good with the technical, the software, any of that kind of stuff. So I'd say voice memo is your best friend. Your notes app, make sure to record your ideas down. And Josh will explain it later on, but don't get too carried away with the technology side of things, because otherwise you'll end up spending hours and hours on a drum sound when you haven't actually written the song yet.
Yeah.
So focus on the song. If you can't sing it with an acoustic or a piano and the melody, if it doesn't work in that format, it's probably not worth taking it and developing it further on in terms of applying the technology and stuff. But on that side of things, Josh will elaborate a lot more on that kind of thing.
Yeah, in terms of the technology, so like DAWs, which are digital audio workstations, so the kind of program that you would use on a computer. There are a few different ones. A lot of the kind of electronic music producers will use a program called Ableton. And then there's another program called Pro Tools. There's one called Logic. Basically, they're all kind of the same. They all have the same basic framework. None is better than the other, but they all have different strengths. So I'll explain a little bit. So my kind of DAW of choice is Logic. The reason being, it's the one that I know the best. And it kind of has all of the tools that I need for what I do. So Logic is really good for songwriting because it's very easy to use. It's very user-friendly. You can kind of get like your keyboard and then you can play kind of any different sounds. You can record a vocal straight into it. You can tune the vocal, like use pitch correction, make it sound really good. And then it's kind of a good marriage between like sort of audio, like real instruments and electronic music. And then on the electronic side, a lot of our producers use Ableton. Ableton is really good at like manipulating audio, so kind of getting a lot of those weird sort of sounds that you might hear in pop music. And it's really good for kind of making beats and stuff like that. Another one people may have heard of is FL Studio. That's also really good for beats. And then there's Pro Tools, which is kind of on the other side. And that's really good for like, if you're recording drums, 2 guitars and a bass guitar and like a piano, like all kind of real instruments. So that's what you'll find kind of in studios and stuff like that. So there's kind of like, there's the electronic side and there's all the way to the kind of studio real band side. And then I like Logic because I think it's kind of the best of both worlds. Yeah, so that's a little bit on DAWs. But like Ken's was saying with the not getting too caught up in the technical side of things, we sort of have worked in both ways, where we'll kind of have a song and then we'll go and start making the beats. And we just have found that whenever we work on the song more at first, just with us and an acoustic guitar, the song always turns out better. We've had a few songs that we have kind of finished and put out there where we've spent less time on the song and more time on the production. And it's always sounds cool, but it just doesn't work as well as a song. So right now we've got a good kind of balance because sometimes you need to sort of start getting the vibe and the sounds there so that you can feel it more. It helps you work, but yeah.
But yeah, don't be limited by technology. If you're not a producer, if you don't know a producer, if you just have yourself and you can sing a melody and write down lyrics, and you know someone who plays piano or guitar, that's enough to be able to sing a song in church. So
Yeah, totally.
don't let that side of it limit you guys.
Awesome. So speaking of, some people have certain skills. Kenan, like I'm not really a technical guy. Josh is like, I've got more of a producer, logic DAW mindset. Um, how do you collaborate with people? What should you look for in people you collaborate with? Do you have to collaborate? Especially in a church context when you're writing songs for church, just collaboration in general.
Yeah, I remember early on when we started songwriting, I used to listen to interviews from people that were a lot more experienced than us for inspiration. So the good thing is, and Pastor Wayne preaches about this all the time, but YouTube has so many good resources to get started and learning and that kind of thing. And so learn from the guys at Bethel, at Hillsong, or any songwriters that you guys feel inspired by, and learn as much from them. So with Hillsong, I remember hearing that they worked really, really hard to develop a collaboration culture. And I can definitely tell why. It's because you just make each other stronger when you're learning to work with other people.
Yeah.
You work with people that have different skills, different kind of flavor to you. It's worked really well for us, kind of developing a culture of just collaborating all the time as well. There's a lot of points to talk about on this one. So I'll touch on a few and then Josh will further develop them. But I think when you collaborate, just you have to be really secure in who you are. Everyone has different strengths, everyone has different skills, and everyone has something unique that they bring to the table. So just be confident in the fact that you don't need to think like everybody else, because it's easy to walk into a situation where you feel maybe intimidated by the level of skill of the other person, or it may be really hard to put your ideas out there. So I'd say one of the most important things is just to be confident in who God's made you to be, and the skills that he's given you. And when you're kind of comfortable with yourself and you go into a session just confident in who God's made you to be, you can kind of really start to learn and develop and from the strengths of other people. So
yeah,
that's what is really beautiful about collaboration. Everyone brings something different to the table and you combine your skills to create something epic. So I'm not very good with music. My strengths are probably with words, and I like to try and come up with the melodies. So for me, that means I need people that are good with music, people that are good with production. And I've just learned to play to my strengths, and then collaborate in that space as well. Yeah, that's probably where I would start in terms of collaboration.
Yeah, totally. And then one thing that we've fought really hard to create is have a culture of honesty, like honest critique. Right now, our kind of songwriting group, well, for years it was just us, and then for another few years we had kind of quite a small crew of sort of 5 or 6 sort of songwriters and producers. For the most recent album that we've done, this kind of crew of writers and producers has grown to like 20 or 30, and we've been finding now it is super important, like as soon as you start, that you can establish a culture where if I say your song sucks, I'm not saying that you suck as a person. I'm just saying this idea is not very good. And yeah, it is something that you have to fight to establish, but it does mean that everything you produce and everything you write is going to be the best that it possibly can be. And I think it's really important that we can separate ourselves from our songs. The problem when you marry sort of one idea, and if you don't take people's critique, then it means that you're just kind of stuck on this one song. And sure, your feelings might be protected, but it means that the song isn't going to reach as many people. And ultimately, you're not doing your job as well as you could be. And so it's also really important just to be friends. We are very good friends. We're actually brothers-in-law, and we've known each other for, I don't know, like 13 years or something crazy like that. So it means that we do have a relationship, so that if we do fight about a song, or if we're honestly critiquing each other, we're not going to take that to heart, because we know, we just want to make the song the best that it can be. So it is really important to establish that, when you're collaborating.
Yeah, and just honor the people around you, recognize what they bring to the table, and then try and bring the best out of those people as well.
Yeah.
I've become a better songwriter by just letting Josh do what he's good at, and me not trying to, just impose my way of doing things on it. I think just learn to honor one another, and you guys will find that the collaboration space is just really incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Amazing. So we've talked about songwriting and tips to take songs from beginning to end and collaboration. But we haven't talked about, we talked a little bit about the songs that haven't been heard. Can you guys share about the experience where you wrote a song that was just crap? And yeah.
Yes.
There's
Which
so many of them that you guys would have never heard, and for very good reason. But on this point of like, that you've kind of brought up, I think the most important thing, and this is the thing that we always tell our young songwriters coming through and our new songwriters, is that the faster you learn to separate your identity from your creativity, just the faster you will improve, not only as a songwriter, but as a creative overall and as a person.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it comes back to what I kind of touched about before, is you just need security and confidence in who you've been created to be is the most important thing, because the reality of getting involved in a craft like songwriting is that it is actually really hard, because you're pouring your heart and your soul into a piece of art, and then you put it out there for the world to see, or for your leaders, the friends to see, and they're basically just stabbing it, cutting at it, which really hurts, but it actually forms it into a much stronger piece of art. And it's important that we do bring excellence into that area and get better, because we can't really reach our world if the art that we're creating is bad. So if we have no standard, if we have no level of excellence, we're not going to be able to impact those around us, because the art won't be excellent, and that'll get in the way of opening people's heart up to God and communicating them on a heart level. So I'd say, early on in our songwriting, the first, we literally spent a whole summer on one song trying to get it right. And I always tell the story, but Pastor Wayne literally would tell us, like, this sucks, guys, go back to the studio. You know what I mean? So like, when you're young and you're like vulnerable, it's really hard, and it actually hurts. But that's why when you separate your identity from your creativity, you'll be able to move forward, because then you're not hearing, they're not attacking me personally, this is just an idea. There's so many more ideas out there, and you don't just want to get married to this one idea and put your whole being and identity into this one thing. So I'd say the most important thing is being able to separate your identity from your creativity. Learn to embrace critique, seek it out, because at the end of the day, it just makes you better. And if everyone has the same goal, we've all got the same goal. We want people to be connected to Jesus. We want to create opportunities where people can encounter Jesus, and in order to do that, we need to make each other better. And that's where the critique and stuff comes in there.
And there's a story of this dude one time who came to us with a song. He was like, "Hey guys, this is this song and he'd been working on the same song for like 4 years. He hadn't written any other songs. It was just this one song. He'd like done lots of different arrangements, and like, what about this chord instead of this chord? And he was kind of showing us his different chords, and like, I thought about this. And it was clear that he really liked the song, and he was asking us for critique, but he wasn't really. So we kind of said like, "Oh, maybe you could change this." And he was like, "Yeah, okay." And then he never did. And it's like, cool, you've got your song that you like. But I was just thinking, what a shame, because you could have written so many more songs in that 4 years than just this one song, if you'd been able to take the critique and then be strong enough to move on to something else. Which is like, I think if you marry this one idea, then you do limit yourself, and you limit what God can do through your gifts. So,
and we've seen it time and time again with so many different songwriters. The ones that are secure in who they are, and they don't take things personally, they're the ones that get so much better, so much faster. So you can kind of decide if you want to limit yourself or not, depending on the level that you're willing to open up to critique and feedback. When you get to a level where you want it and you embrace it, that's a good place to be, because you'll only improve faster and faster.
Yeah.
Amazing. So you kind of already answered it with that last question, but when do you give up on a song or an idea? When is it time to just cut your losses and call it?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's definitely trial and error, especially early on. So I would just keep songs to maybe your friend group early on, because if you play a song for 10 people or 5 people or even less, and they don't like it, that's a lot easier to handle than a room of like 100+ people.
Yeah.
Just not liking
Yeah.
your song. And so yeah, it's different for everyone, but you'll all get a different feel for what works and what doesn't. We only know because of experience.
Yeah.
So early on, we would often try songs to our team or to our youth, and they would not be very good. But years later, just getting more experience, we're able to tell what will work and what won't work a bit faster. So it just comes down to experience.
I think it's good to keep your mind and your spirit open to what else God might want to drop. You know, sometimes with a song, it'll get to the point where you just kind of feel like you're beating a dead horse, and it's like you're just not getting anything out of this. And you can keep on trying, because it's like, oh, I really like this thing. But if you can just let it go and maybe go in search of something else, then I think also we're always working on multiple ideas, never sort of just one song, which kind of can help, because maybe one song's gone a bit dry. If you have to drop that, you don't feel like you're completely lost, because you have 3 other songs that you're working on at a time. But also sometimes you can kind of spend more time on this song, and then maybe 6 months down the track, God might revive something in your heart for that other song, and then that can kind of turn into something else. So yeah, it's good to.
And that's a really good thing. So a good example of that last point Josh talked about was the song "Never Let You Go." I think they sung it earlier tonight. That song was written maybe a year and a half ago, and it probably could have been on another Akupu's Revolution project, but we just felt that it needed a bit more time to breathe. It needed to be developed a bit more. And we're really glad that we made that call, just to delay it, to work on it more and more, because if we'd released it back then, it wouldn't be kind of serving our congregation and our churches as well as it is now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it just needed the time. So you get a bit of a feel for it, but it's definitely an important point to know when to let a song go, when to put a song on the shelf, and then when to bring it back. You'll just get a feel for it as you go. Or if you want to get that process shortened, just ask your pastor. I'm sure they'll give you some good feedback of whether to kill it or whether to keep it alive.
Yeah. Totally. It is good to have to try and establish a working relationship like that. We've gotten to the point now where Pastor Sam can kind of come in and say, this is not good, all of it, and we can just sort of move on, because you know, we value, and you need that covering as well, the pastoral covering. Otherwise you can just kind of go out and sing anything over the church, which is quite a scary thing, because you haven't been leading the church for the last 30 years, you know.
Awesome. So we got to wrap it up here, but I wanted to I don't know if you take 10 or 15 seconds, and if Kenan and Josh came to you, 2013 versions of yourselves, and they were starting to write songs, what's the one thing you would say to them?
Great question. I would say to be confident in who God's made you to be, because I think that's been the key for definitely myself, just knowing and who I am in God, because then I'm able to receive critique. People can say terrible things, really meaningful things, to things that you've put your heart and soul into, and if you don't know who you are and you're not confident in that, you can get really hurt and kind of open yourself up in the wrong way. So yeah, I tell myself just to be confident in who God's made me to be, and to, as I said before, separate my creativity from my identity. And that would have,
I would say put in the work. There's an idea that I really love, which is, and our youth pastor, Pastor Scott, kind of smashed us with this one time, because he told our team, there are venues in your city that were built for the church, that were built for worship, that were built for the church to occupy, but they're being occupied by Bruno Mars because he works harder.
Wow.
You know, and it's like, it's actually true. The people in the industry work so hard. You know, you hear the classic story of like a producer just quit his job and then he went and he lived in some basement and he just worked on music 24/7 for 3 years until he hit it big. And it's like, that guy apparently cares more about making himself famous than we care about making Jesus famous.
Wow.
And you know, it's like, you can use grace to sort of justify, like, you know, we're just going to play our part and then God will take care of the rest, which is like, yeah, true.
Good luck.
We have the power of God, but imagine if we would bring our faith and our hard work plus God. Imagine how much we could do.
Yeah, Scott, Pastor Scott, just lastly, Pastor Scott always says, don't let someone trying to glorify themselves outwork you trying to glorify God.
Yeah.
Which that just really lights a fire under us and gets us working hard.
Yeah. There's no excuse to be lazy.
Yeah.
You're a church guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I wish we had hours and hours to answer more questions, but we have Pastor Steve finishing us off in under 7 minutes. So I'm going to post a link here real quick, but let's give a hand in the chat. You can unmute. Thank these guys for just taking time out and blessing us, because it was amazing. I was blessed, and I felt just genuineness from this. So thank you so much, guys, for your experience and everything you do. Here's the link, guys. Password is GYL. Pastor Steve Graham. Hurricane Steve is going to be in 6 minutes, whatever time zone you're in. I don't know, but that's it for us, guys. Thank you so much. This will be recorded, and Manuel will reach out to you guys with access.
Thank you very much for having us, guys. Hope you learned something.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yes, absolutely. Sweet. All right, I'm going to end this. Hop on the other Zoom, guys. It's in your email. You got it. This is amazing. Boom. Thanks, guys. You were fantastic. I'm like still going here, but all right. I'm going to end it, guys. Please go on the main meeting now. You have to go to the bathroom, grab some water, do whatever you need to do to be ready for Pastor Steve Graham.